I am one of 11 million undocumented immigrants living here in America. I am one of 800,000 DACA recipients. And I am one of 100 undocumented students in medical school, training to become a doctor. Though these numbers are the facts of my life, they obscure the complexity of how I got here and what the future holds for me. Now, one of the earliest memories I had after moving to America was of a cramped but cozy living room of a one-bedroom apartment where the 5 of us began a new chapter together. We aren't going back to Thailand, my parents told my brother, sister, and I. We're staying here in America as Robin Hoods. That's the Thai saying for becoming undocumented, for overstaying our tourist visas, which were set to expire within a few months. After an economic crash in Southeast Asia, my parents found themselves rebuilding their lives once again. And though we didn't truly understand what being undocumented would have meant, we knew that this is what we had to do as a family for a better future. So my parents got work at local Thai restaurants right here in the Bay Area. And they would come home late, and I would wait up to say hi to them. And as they entered the apartment, I would run up to them and hug them, put my arms around their waists before they could even take their aprons off. And I would remember the smells of fish sauce and curry spices. And let me tell you, you don't forget the smell of fish sauce. And as I looked into their eyes and see their tired expressions after a hard day's work, I would ask them, what can I do to help? Focus on your job, they would say. And my job as a young child there was to do well in school. And we all looked to education as the key to success. We all look to education as a way to our American dream. And after witnessing everything that my parents were willing to sacrifice for the opportunities that they never had, I channeled their work ethic into years of diligence. I immersed myself in my studies. I eventually learned and mastered the English language, excelled in AP classes, and graduated as high school salutatorian. All the while working 30 hours a week. Thank you. Thank you. All the while working 30 hours a week at our family's Thai restaurant. I applied to 5 UCs for college. I was accepted to all of them. UC Davis, in particular, offered me a Regents Scholarship, which was a full tuition scholarship offered to an exceptional few. I was relieved. All of those days spent writing world history papers in the back room and then running to the front when the restaurant was busy were worth it. I could go to college and afford it, because otherwise, I was ineligible for any financial aid as an undocumented student. 3 months before the start of college, I was called into the financial aid office. They wanted to see proof of my citizenship and legal immigration status. When I told them that I did not have a green card and I didn't have a social security number, the officer looked at me and said, "Let us know when your status changes." And just like that, the scholarship offer was withdrawn. The formula for the American dream had failed me. I listened to my parents, I did my job, I earned this scholarship opportunity, and yet I came to find that the American dream for me was a false promise. And it was the first time that I came face to face with an institutional barrier created by my immigration status that I couldn't face alone. Thankfully, I have my family, and they helped support me through the first year of college while I bussed tables and hunted for private scholarships. Oh, by the way, I ended up here at UC Berkeley. Because it would have cost the same anyways, and we all know which is the better school, so. But growing up, I actually was isolated and afraid of the constant threat of deportation. If anyone learned that I was undocumented, same for my family. I remember holding my breath every time a police car drove by or I heard a siren. In the second year of my college, I met other undocumented folks, other undocumented immigrants for the first time, and it changed my life. On a bright sunny day, on a rooftop deck overlooking Lake Merritt, my family and I arrived to a scholarship ceremony. And we looked around and we saw other families there. And we leaned to each other and whispered, "Are all these other people undocumented too?" And later on that afternoon, the reception would celebrate young scholars with our families by our side. And I saw for the first time that being undocumented could be filled with so much joy, so much support, rather than the shame and the stigma. And the positive energy that day was unlike anything I had ever before associated with being undocumented. That was in 2010, and that year was important because I would continue to go on this journey of redefining what it would mean to be an undocumented immigrant. I enrolled in Professor Tyrone Hayes' class, actually, here at Berkeley, the Intro to Endocrinology. And it was during that class that students protested the tuition hikes that were happening that year by having a UC walkout day. While I was in solidarity, I didn't come to America to miss class, and so I went to class. But what Professor Hayes did next would stay with me forever. Instead of lecturing, he shared with us his story of being one of the few African American students in an Ivy League institution. He shared with us the importance of carving your own path when you are first, so that others could be there too. He put up Einstein's words: "Those who have the privilege to act, to know, have the duty to act." And it was all a moment of clarity for me. For years, I've been watching undocumented youth speak up publicly, while people like my parents were working day in and day out. How could I sit here in this lecture hall and do nothing? No, it was my duty to speak up about being undocumented, to influence the very policies that affected my communities. And so I became deeply involved in immigrant rights activism. I wrote about my immigration story. I testified at the state capitol and in support of in-state financial aid here in California and to limit ICE and police collaboration. And I learned through all of that if we come together as a community, even as undocumented immigrants, we could reclaim our agency. And in 2012, 2 years later, I graduated with honors from Berkeley in molecular and cell biology. Thank you. Now, by this point, I knew that I wanted to become a doctor. From personal experiences of having very little or no access to healthcare, I wanted to become a physician who would change policies and influence the status quo of how healthcare was delivered, and thereby impacting uninsured, low-income, homeless, immigrant communities, the very same that I was a part of and have worked with. Yet, there were so many unanswered questions. Is it even possible for me to go to med school? How would I do it? And at that point, I always used to joke that undocumented medical students were like unicorns, because we would ask around and somebody would say that I had heard of someone that had known of somebody that went to med school, but no one could actually ever find the person. And I just thought they simply didn't exist. And that was when I co-founded PreHealth Dreamers, an organization with the mission of supporting undocumented immigrant students in their health and science careers. With my colleagues, Denise Rojas and Angel Koo. And what began as a quest to find a unicorn became a community around the nation that engaged in peer advising, in resource sharing, and in advocacy. And we pictured to ourselves and asked, what if undocumented students could be considered equally in their admissions to graduate and professional schools? What if institutions would recognize that our lived experiences leave us well equipped to provide exceptional health care and change the systems that have kept us out? What if we could recreate that positive energy that I had felt on that rooftop that day at that ceremony? And the more we believed it, the more schools we applied to, the more hearts we engaged, the more champions we found, and the more policies we changed. And 6 years later, I am now one of 100 undocumented medical students around the country. When I first got into UCSF, I made sure to share my story far and wide because I wanted every single undocumented student to know that it was possible and that they are not alone. And luckily, along the way, I was able to have everybody that has helped me to that point be with me. I am one of 11 million. I am one of 800,000. I am one of 100. We've been, for the past year, in a chapter of crises. Every day as an undocumented immigrant, policies and politics attempt to define my world. The 2016 election, wondering which executive order would rescind DACA, whether or not Congress will or will not do something. These are all examples of that reality. But everybody here today may not have been undocumented. But we are all a part of a community that has faced injustice, that have experienced our rights being questioned, and experienced health inequities. And so we must remember that crises are also opportunities. We could give up, turn the other way, or we could take no for an answer and use our agency for change. So the question today is, how are we all going to engage in the policies and politics that allow people like me to become American? Thank you.